Saturday. It's a very new concept which began in Austin by Stephanie Harare, and I was very glad to meet her in person and so inspired by her, and I decided to do this and reached out to Madan. So the concept says that, okay, on a Saturday we will pick up a topic which is probably the topic which has been less touched, or people are not actively working on those topics, but they are interested in learning them. And we identified that Lightning is one of the things where the Salesforce trend is moving towards, and we have we have not explored more, and a lot of people need some knowledge sharing. So let's get started here. A little bit introduction about myself. Mohith Shrivastava. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem now for 5 years. I've seen a lot of platform changing every release, and I'm a Salesforce MVP as well. So I'm excited here to present this and get most value out of this and have a collaborative learning session here for an hour or so. So let's talk about some of the prerequisites, right? I just want to make it clear that there is a certain amount of prerequisite when you touch a framework like Lightning, because when we start speaking about Visualforce or Apex, right, we typically start assuming it does not require any experience except knowing some of the object-oriented concepts. You get started and you learn. Pretty easy to pick up, but as you go along, you will find that the path for learning the learning curve is not that much. But that's not same with Lightning components. I mean, you have to be familiar with multiple stacks here, to start understanding the fundamentals and how Lightning components are different. So the prerequisites here are, again, you need to be familiar with at least JavaScript, basics of JavaScript, not an advanced JavaScript, but if you're already familiar with JavaScript, things will be very easier. Also the DOM model, the DOM model of the browser, you need to be a little bit aware of what is our DOM, what is a hierarchy, and what is a parent and child. And you also need to be familiar with CSS. Now again, as I say, a familiarity with CSS, I don't expect that you need to be an expert in CSS, but you should have some fundamental understanding of how CSS works. And if you have worked on Salesforce development with Apex and Visualforce, right, you're going to find some similarities there, although conceptually both are very different. But having a prior knowledge of Apex and Visualforce is going to help. I'm getting a background noise. Can we mute someone here? Can we all make sure that we go on a mute so that we don't hear any background noise? All right, thank you. So let's talk about single page application and how single page application is fundamentally different from from a traditional page lifecycle, because the fundamental of Lightning starts with understanding what is a SPA. A SPA is a single page application. So in a traditional page lifecycle, right, if you would have seen the previous Visualforce or the way Salesforce tabs are structured, right? So what happens there is when you sort of start making a request, I mean, when you load a web page, right, you get a set of tabs, initial HTML renders, which will have links to other HTML. And then when you click on one of the tabs, a form request or a post request is sent to the server, and another HTML is loaded, right? Or even if you reload the page, a new HTML is loaded on the page. So that's the traditional or the Visualforce, where a new HTML is rendered back from the server every time you do a post request, right? So, and the way the SPA applications are structured is, you will see that we load all the HTML, that is all the component bundles at a time on the page, and then whenever you want to fetch specific data from the Salesforce or from the external server, we will make an AJAX call, and then we will only fetch that JSON and manipulate the DOM at the client end. So there is no loading of HTML again and again as in the traditional page cycle. Now that's how the architecturally both the frameworks are different. Now let's understand one more concept which is required to understand Lightning components, which is the concept of web components. Now, what is a web component? So web component is an evolving concept in browser where we imagine a UI to have split into different components. So for example, let's consider a simple mobile app page, right? Like the one that I'm showing here. So for example, the UI button, right? So if you look at this application, everything is a component in itself. Like you can imagine this as a component. Like a button itself is a component, and then we have a weather component which has a map inside, which is another component. We have a finance component, and all these should operate independently, but then you can assemble them, as per your need. And that's the concept of web components. Like you imagine your UI as a reusable components, which can be again ported on another web page, and as we can see, on Lightning we have different places where we can sort of arrange these components as we need by just using the Lightning builders that is provided for various interfaces. Like we have an app builder to build your Salesforce One app pages. We'll have community builder to build your template-based communities. And we can take these components outside Salesforce with something called as Lightning Out. We're going to explore that. And we can also use these components in our Visualforce. So it's like once you build it, you can use it in different places. And also you can build a component and put it on an app exchange where your customers can install that component from an app exchange and then use it in their art. So basically it's reusable models. So let's get on to difference between Visualforce and Lightning components. And in fact, the reason why I put this slide is because we really want to understand what is architectural difference between Visualforce and Lightning components before even we look into code and start building these Lightning components and see how we can build them. And we have all been doing Visualforce now 5 years, and we have gotten into a comfortable situation now where we are, where we feel that okay, with Visualforce we can do a lot of stuff, but not the same with Lightning. But well, that's not the reality. The reality is you can definitely do more stuff with Lightning as well. Architecturally, these are differences, and these are the basic differences that I found. Why I should be building my future application in Lightning components. If Lightning component framework satisfies all my business needs, not go into Visualforce. Because so what has happened over the time that I've seen is, developers tend to build Visualforce as a monolithic app. Now, when I say a monolithic app, we don't break down Visualforce into different templates. Also, although you will see Visualforce as a component model in itself, like you can create Visualforce components, right, and create attributes for that. Like if you're an experienced Visualforce developer, you already know this, that you have a template model where you can make the UI reusable. But somehow that's not been adopted so far, and people tend to build a Visualforce page which has like 1,000 lines of code, and they have an Apex controller which has like 1,000 lines of code. Right? So you make your app monolithic. What happens with that is it becomes very difficult for the other developer to sort of debug, debug the app when you don't break the app. While Lightning component, by default, it then forces the developers to break application into multiple components. Like there is no choice that you write everything as a monolithic, like because you have different component bundles. The basic difference here is that you tend to write everything and imagine everything as a component model. Because if you want to be successful in building an application with Lightning components, then you will sooner or later realize that the moment you start don't break your web page into multiple components, it becomes more complex, and it's hard. Let's also look at what are the other ways in Visualforce if not Lightning components. Like how can I build a spa? Well, you can build a spa still with Visualforce, because Visualforce is just like a web server or a container for you to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you can use frameworks like Angular, React, etc., which is a tedious process though. Like you can use Angular, React. There are other frameworks like Ember or Handlebars. You can use them, but the problem with them is they have their own learning curve, and some of the platform features you will have to replicate by yourself, which can be tedious. For example, managing multi-currency or managing different locales, right? All these functionalities you will have to either write it by yourself or get it somewhere from the community as an open source project if it is exposed, which gets tedious because then you are re-engineering the platform. You're not leveraging what is provided by the platform. While the Lightning components, right? They have already built a lot of things for you. I mean, you don't have to worry about data binding with your objects because there is a mechanism provided for that. You don't have to worry about locale conversions because there are tags for that. So there are a lot of things. You don't have to worry about your labels, your static resources, right? Because everything is provided by the platform for you to do multi-language apps. So that's the fundamental difference between Visualforce and Lightning components. And as we will explore now on how to build these components, you will see that it's not that difficult as we imagine. And so again, why Lightning components is again because reusability. We talked about reusability. The other benefit is responsive. It fits on any device, right? Now I don't have to worry about making a separate page for mobile, right? Because by default it encourages a responsive build. And if you have worked with design systems like SLDS, they automatically handle that responsiveness for you. Most of the tags are responsive, and if you use it properly, you should be able to write once and reuse it on every device. The event-driven approach. Now, this is where Lightning components are very, very different than the Visualforce. So in Visualforce, what we had is we had a getter setter concept. So you declare a variable at the back end, call it as a getter setter, and then you declare your markup, like input markups, and bind that. So once you post a form, you have that variable from your form, and then you can do your DML operations or query. So they had a concept of use state, and there is no event-driven concept. But here you will see that if you have two different Lightning components, the way to communicate between two different Lightning components is via events. So one component will publish an event, just like you can imagine a radio station, right? A radio station source publishes something, right? And then as the listeners, we try to listen them. So there will be another component, which wants to listen to it, which will have a sort of antenna. Let's assume that it has an antenna. So it will be a receiver and will receive, the signals, which is again signals and the data. So it's almost like communicating between two web components via the event-driven approach. And we'll look into an application now and explore, what is this event-driven pattern? How can I define an event? And what are the different types of events and so forth? So let's get started here. So one more thing is, again, Lightning is also MVC. If you have been with Visualforce, you understand that Visualforce is an MVC where you have a controller and a view and a model, just like any other frameworks as well. There are a lot of MVC frameworks out there. Lightning is also MVC, but there are two controllers. You will see that you will have two controllers here. We have a client-side controller and a backend controller as well. While in our Visualforce pages, there was no concept of client-side controller. Like if you are writing a spa app, right, then you spin your own JavaScript, which is basically your client-side controller. But the bundle or the component bundle automatically provides that for us, which we call it as client-side controller. So we have a view which is our component HTML, and then we will have our controller, which will be our JS bundle, which will have a helper and a JS, and I'll demonstrate to you as we go along. And the storage, right? The controller itself can cache data. The client-side controller, like you don't have to go back and forth with the server. But if the data needs to be fetched from the server, then you can write an Aura-enabled Apex layer on top of it, and then you can get back that data from Apex, and then you store it inside an attribute. We'll speak about what is attribute and the basics of your. And the model can be your database or your Apex SQL or SOQL, and your objects or the schema that you have. Let's go inside a bundle now. So what is a component? What does it has? Basically, if you look at Lightning component end to end of the stack, it will be comprising of 4 sections basically for you. The XML definition, right? The XML component definition, which is the bundle definition or your meta file, for you to deploy from one org to another. That's the XML definition of it. And then it'll have JS controller and a helper, right? So the helper is basically where you want to put a lot of reusable code, which can be used only within inside that component. But you don't want to blow up your controller because you want to keep it very simple and have all the logic in the helper. That's why the helper is meant for. And then you will have a styling resource or the CSS embedded in it. We'll talk about that. And then we have an Aura enabled Apex class. So let's switch back to our environment a bit here. And all right, let's switch back to our environment. And before I start, my next slide should also tell you about tooling, right? Like what tooling do we have currently to do the Lightning component? So currently, to be honest, there are not a lot of tooling support as you can find with any Salesforce projects in overall. Like if you look at other frameworks like Angular or React, they have a sophisticated CLIs build. There is a lot of community-driven development or an open source projects which developers are doing, which is going to make their own life simpler. Lightning is getting there. We have some support from these vendors, like Mavensmith has its own version 7. If you have downloaded that has support for Lightning. There's a Force.com IDE beta that has come up. If you have not tried, you should try that because that has support for Lightning. Again, it's in beta, so you may find some bugs. But again, as a community, we must try to adopt these and try to get all the bugs in front of the developers who are responsible for this and get it sorted, or contribute yourself. In fact, the Force.com IDE is an open source. So, and there are a bunch of tools, like you can use Developer Console as well for your development, but typically, you would like to have a local copy of all that you do and push it onto a Git for your versioning. Or for your deployment from one org to another, and generally don't do everything inside Developer Console. But if you're familiar with that and comfortable with that, just go ahead. Also, one of my colleagues here at Code Science, the company that I work for, he built something called as Visual Studio Code plugin. Now, all these are links actually. You can, when my slide is presented to you or you get the slide, you can just click on the link and it will take you to a download link where you can download the tool. Sublime plugin is one that I'll be using today. It's built by one of the Salesforce evangelists, very well-known Salesforce evangelist, Dave Carroll, and and I've personally enjoyed this plugin more when I've done Lightning development because it makes life pretty much simpler, and it has that separation where you can all right, so let's get started here. So let's do one thing. So let's get back to our IDE and see what we can do here. So how many of you use Sublime in your day-to-day? So again, Sublime is basically nothing. It's a text editor just like any other editor. But what you can do is you can basically create your own folder inside, either you're using I'm on a Mac, but if you're on a Windows or anything like that, you can still use this. This is cross-platform file editor tool, which comes with nice syntax highlighting and code. So we're gonna show you how to add a folder, right? So you can basically try to open a folder or add a folder to your project. So for example, you can say open, and then you can say, okay, which folder you want to open that. So you can create a dummy folder to start with, like just name it as something, and you can just use that to. So for example, we have a folder here in my local called sales leaderboard demo, and this is the demo that I'll be using. So once you open a folder, you should typically see, so you will typically not see anything basically, like, because I have already got this, the Lightning components from my org, I have all these, but typically you will not see anything. So the installation of Sublime plugin is there on that website, and I have the link to that. You can download that. So remember, it uses Force CLI at the back end. So if you have not heard of Force CLI is a tool basically to do all your Salesforce login and metadata deployment and data deployment, all these things via your command line. So this plugin actually uses that. To show you how this works is, so once you have this plugin, you will have something called as Lightning. Once you left click it, and then you say Salesforce login, and then it will pop up you something to enter your username here. So now let's enter this. It will take you to your browser, where it will ask you to, okay, put in your credentials there. So for example, I want to put this credential in. I say, okay, allow this, and then it will say that, okay, the authorization is complete. Now if you switch back to your Sublime, you should see that, okay, it has authenticated you successfully. Now what you can do is, you can say, okay, fetch me all the Lightning component bundles that you want. So you can say Lightning, you can say, okay, fetch me all the components. So I said all the bundles, then it exports all the bundles to your, to your folder structure that you have created. So let's take a look at a sample app here. I call it as a sales leaderboard app basically. So what this app does is it has two different components. One is the board itself, which displays the revenue generated by or the revenue collected by each sales rep. And then we have a detail leaderboard, which is like when you click on that. So let me show you that app, and then we will try to discuss that. So to test your app, right, you will create a Aura app like this. So you will name your app, and then you go to the sales leaderboard app.app, right? So as you can see here now, we have a sales leaderboard app, and this is a simple Lightning component. Basically, it's trying to fetch some data from Salesforce, that is the opportunities, and it aggregates for each individual user and shows it as a card list. And then when I click on this, it actually splits up the opportunities that's aggregating it. Can I ask you guys to go on a mute if somebody is not on a mute, please? I would appreciate if everyone is on mute, because, all right, thank you so much. So yeah, so this is a sales leaderboard app. Basically, the reason why I want to put a very simple app in front of you is because we want to show what is possible and simplify it a bit further. So this is a simple app. What it does is when I load this app, right, it fetches all the the users that are there in my org, and it goes and checks each opportunities and aggregates them or groups them by user. And then when I click on each individual card, then what it does is it gives me a nice model and lists me the opportunities that are there for that particular users or that particular sales rep. So this is a very simple app again. Now let's get back to the code and see, to make this working in Lightning, how much of amount of code is required and what are the steps to accomplish that. So let's get here. So as you can see, you need an Aura application. If you want to test your application, you have to have an Aura application basically. So if you have namespace the org, you can use the namespace, or you can say C dot, and it will just work. But SE Dreaming is some of the namespace that I created for my org, and I prefer to use namespace, but you can use C dot and then the components. Then you will list on, okay, so this app is made up of two different components, right? So one of them is the leaderboard itself, which is which is the board that you're seeing there, and then we have a leaderboard detail component. right? So the leaderboard detail component is basically, so when you click on one of the cards, right, whatever the detail that comes up there, right, that's called leaderboard detail component. So let's go into one of these components. So if you want to go to the Salesforce leaderboard comp, so this is my component file, that we saw, and you will see everything will have something called as implements. We'll talk about what is implements. So again, implements is basically tells Salesforce that, okay, where you want to use this app for, right? So if you want to use app builder, then you're gonna say that, okay, this is a the flexi page available for all page types. App hostable, if you want to make it for like an SF1 thing. And then you'll have a require tag, which is basically just like your include script tag in your Visualforce, where you export the static resource out there, right? So the require tag is basically like that. And what are attributes and handlers, we'll talk about with the slides now. Let's switch back to the slides and start working on the basics, and then we'll get back there. So the example of a component, right? It will have a component file. The moment you spin up a new component, you should see everything, a component file, a JS file, a helper file, a CSS file added, a design file for you to expose some of the parameters for your admins to configure when they drag the components on the builder. You will also have a renderer, which is like if you want to override the behavior of the, the rendering cycle. So the example component will look just like this. It will have all these tags and the markups that you want to do. It will have a handler. I'll tell you the reason behind handler. Handler is again basically handling an event, while publisher is basically you're publishing an event. We'll talk about more of these as we go along. So what are attributes, right? Very important to understand. Like in Visualforce, we have this concept of getters and setters, but to store those variables that are coming from the page or coming from the backend controller and displaying on the page. While attributes are basically in Lightning, they are your objects or the variables, just like your Java objects basically. So you can declare them as any data type, like you can tell them that it's of data type, your own Apex wrapper data type if you're building an Apex wrapper, or your own, it can be of object type like account or your custom object type, just like how you build your classes, right, or your objects. And then you can also have primitive data types like string, So attributes are again basically a variable holder for you to hold, and then you can reference this attribute as v dot. Like as you can see, you can reference these attributes as v dot data by the attribute name, and that should give you the data on your markup. We'll talk about expressions, right? I mean, expressions, just like for any other language, we have a Lightning component expression. It's basically you can take two different attributes, do some operations on them, like ternary operations or addition or deletion. You can go through the list of expression functions, which you can do it on your client side itself, right? You don't have to write your separate controller or JavaScript controller to do that. You can do it on your client side with a markup. That's the expression for you. So called expressions, and then we have styling a Lightning component, right? So every component bundle, as you can see, will have a style resource. So if you see the Salesforce leaderboard, right? You will have a .cmp file, you have .js file, you have a helper file, you have a CSS file, right? .css file. So every component you have an opportunity to introduce a CSS file, and if you are So one styles that you load externally like this makes it as an OOO CSS, which is object-oriented CSS, where you say that, okay, if you want something, you just put a class name onto it, and it just looks for the class name from your resource file, right? Which is just similar how it is in Visualforce or any other HTML and CSS frameworks, basically. But the speciality is every component also has a CSS, and everything is referenced by this. So, and you will see two variations of it. As you can see here, there is one .this where you can say, okay, for this entire component, I want to make the background as gray, right, irrespective of the class, irrespective of the class that's there on the on the static resource. So you can do that. Now, if you want to make a specific component, like an important tag basically in your CSS, where you say, okay, important, then it overrides all the rules. So if you want to do that, you can do that with this dot and don't space basically, and it will override everything. It's just like an important. Like for example, if you want to make a component as a specific style, then you can just say that, okay, the class name of that, and then say that, okay, just make. I get a lot of background noise, guys.
Please,
Can we
mute yourself?
Please mute yourself? No. Yeah, just make sure that you're on a mute. All right. So then we have this dot red. So then we have this spacing, right? So if you look at the difference between this and this, is there is a space. Now, what is the meaning when I don't have a space? So when I don't have a space, that means I'm overriding everything that's already there on that component. Like whatever I put it inside this as a style guide, it's going to take only that, and it's going to ignore everything. Just like you have explanation important in your CSS, if you're a CSS developer, you are familiar with that important, which overrides everything, all the rules. But if you put a space and then put the class name and then write the style sheet, it's not gonna override it. Basically, it's gonna follow your hierarchy. And it's gonna look at the parent class and then the child class and try to follow the DOM hierarchy or the CSS exact hierarchy that we have. So yeah, there are different ways to style this. Like if you're using SLDS, then you don't need to do all these things. But if you want to manipulate one particular component to do something style differently, then you can basically come inside the component and go inside the CSS window and write some style sheets there. That's the basic use of it. Otherwise, you should be good with just doing OOCSS, which is basically load everything or load the the Lightning component static resource. All right. Let's move ahead now. Yeah, so another very important concept to understand, before we actually deep dive into the code is events. Events are a big deal here in a Lightning component. So basically, two components interact each other. Like the way to make it interactive is by events. And so basically, if you see this, right, you declare an event. So if I go to my let's see. Okay. So if I go to this app, right? So I click this, right? When I click this, I basically fire an event. Okay. And this component or the detail component actually is listening for that fired event. So it listens that event. Now, how do I fetch the data on this component, right? How does it knows the user ID that I'm clicking into? So like if you see, if I click on this, it renders only that data for that particular user, or the opportunity for that user. So which means this component is somehow receiving the the user ID and then going to the database table and getting that user ID, only the record with respect to that user ID, right? So how is that user ID getting passed, right? So that is where the events. Now that is where I want to go into my Sublime text and show you how the events are there. Now again, you got to break your app, right? So for example, if you see this, my sales leaderboard app that I see, which is a bunch of cards, right? It is a repetition of the same card, right? So if you see here, the aura iteration is basically just like your apex repeat or your ng repeat in Angular. So aura iteration, we say that, okay, you loop over all this data, which is nothing but a sales leaderboard wrapper object here. You loop over that and then render this component. Again, this component is each individual card. So each individual card is itself a component. So if I go to sales leaderboard card component here in my, so you see this is the card component, which accepts one sales leader, and then it displays all the opportunities Yes. So what we do here is when you click that, right? When you click that particular button, we register an event. So publishing an event is via register event tag. So every component that you want to register, or a source station, right here, like uh, your radio station. So every component is your station. So you have to register the event so that you push that signal up. So here, as you can see, we register the event, and the event type, as you can see, it's namespace dot display op, which is nothing but an event file. So I have a display op event file here, right? So display op event file has an attribute here, which is the user ID that I'm sending. Now let's see, how do I fire an event here? So if you go to the leaderboard card component, and if you go to the controller, I would first do a component dot get. Okay. So what is a component dot get? So get us and set us in your Visualforce, right? So similarly, we have a component dot get where you can get the value of that attribute. So my attribute name here is the user ID, the sales user dot user ID. This is my attribute name. So I get the user key, and then I get the event, which is nothing but display op. This display op event, this is the event, right? This is the user ID. So I say, okay, I set the parameter of that attribute, which is via the setter. Again, it's just like a setter. We set params, and we put the ID, and then we put the ID of the user record, user key, and then we fire the event. So when you say dot fire, it fires it. So the moment I click that button, it just fires that event. Now let's see how the listener is going to interact. It must have some listener, right? So the listener is the detail component. Now when I go to the sales detail, you will see that it will have a listener, which is nothing but a handler, right? So to register an event, you use register event. For handling an event, you will use handler. And then you will put the event, which is nothing but the name of the event. So name of the event is display op. And then we say, okay, once the listening happens, do this action. So we say that, okay, show up the model now. So show up the model is nothing but an action. So if you go to the controller, we would have written that show up model. And what we do is basically, if there is, we hide the previous model, or we hide it and show up the model. Basically, we are toggling classes here. So we have a method called as toggle class in our helper. So you would have seen all the code is done in the helper, and then we have a toggle class which basically removes and adds class so that that the hidden model, which is now open. So as you can see here, now we have this get opportunity list, which is our action. So what we do is we control our action now. So the component, right? If you would have seen the component would have had a controller linked to it. Now this is the Apex controller, right? So Apex controller, we call the Apex controller method, which is basically get list opportunities, and then we enqueue the action. So enqueuing of an action is basically, okay, you get all the data, you got the response, you populated the, like if you see LST ops, it is nothing but our, if you look at the component, right, LST ops are nothing but our attributes here, right? So I need to populate this from the backend. So what I do, I say, okay, initiate this action, which is, the controller.get LST opportunities, get that action and pass a param, and then, so let's look at the controller side of it. So to do that, I would typically use Atom. So again, you can do Lightning component build in Atom. Also, Atom is a great editor, and with Mavens, you can do it. Let's look at that class that I was trying to demo you guys. Yeah, so this is the wrapper class basically that you see, which has all that card data, like the name, email, user ID, photo URL. This is for card data. And if you look at the get list opportunities, this is the method that it's calling. It basically looks at the current year, and then it says that, okay, if the opportunity is, if the close date is the current year, then get me those opportunities to me in the front end as a list of opportunities, basically. And then once we get the list of opportunities, we point that into the Aura variable. Okay, we point it here into our opportunities, and then it's very easy. You just say that, okay, get me the name, get me the close date, get me the amount, right? So it's as simple as that. So basically, what we inferred from this demo is these are the things that we inferred from this demo. Let me switch back to my Chrome, switch back to my presentation. Yeah, so basically you saw that leaderboard was card was our publisher, right? It dispatched an event, which is display op event. It passed the parameter, and the sales leaderboard detail was a listener. It listened to it, and then it did the DOM manipulation, or it got back the data there. I want to spend some time explaining you what, I mean, in Apex, right, what is it different than doing normal Apex. So normal Apex is, again, what do we do with normal Apex here? So normal Apex, you write getters and setters, and you have all these getter setters, you define them, and make those connection via your getter setter variable. But when it comes to Lightning, you have to name all your variables by aura enabled. So unless you put a property by aura enabled, you're not going to make it on the UI. It's going to throw up saying, okay, it did not see that variable. So as you can see, my sales leaderboard here, is a wrapper class, and I have made all the variables as aura enabled, just as you make getter setter. Now you don't need getter setter. Now the reason why I want to put it as getter setter is because let's say I want to reuse this component for my Visualforce. I'll just get rid of all my aura enabled class later on, and still this will work for my Visualforce, right? So yeah, it's good practice to have getters and setters as well in case you try to flip it to a Visualforce later on due to some reason. But yeah, typically you do everything as an aura enabled, and then the thing is you have to make your methods also as aura enabled. Okay. So typically have a wrapper class separately written, make it aura enabled, make the data structure that you want to send it to the UI or your JS controller, and the aura enabled is basically your method. So as you can see, get SLDS dashboard data. Right now, this is the data that I'm getting on the first call. Like if I go back to my Sublime text bit here, let's see. Go to my Sublime, and if I want to show you that particular component or the init call, which is the get data, right? So I call this helper that set dashboard. So helper.set dashboard calls to this method. So as you can see, I'm calling this controller method, which is get SLDS dashboard data, which is my controller method. So once I get back the response from the server or the aura enabled method, I set an attribute here, the return value, right? If there is an error, there's an error handling mechanism as well. And you enqueue the action at the front end. So everything is going to display on the front end. That's about Apex controller. I mean, really it is fundamentally very different. Always follow best practices for Apex as well. Like write a service layer for your queries, write a message layer or a wrapper layer for your data that you want to put it on the Visualforce, or the Lightning component. Write a service layer and keep it very simple. Like your remote dispatcher method should be aura enabled method, and it should just point out to a simple hyperclass. All right, so let's get back to our slides, guys. I mean, we are doing pretty well here. I get a lot of interest on Twitter saying this is helping, which is good. The key takeaways are, once you build your components, right, you can use it on app builders, community builders. You can have design variables configured. We'll talk about design variables here in a bit. Let's also talk about how can so I have built my component now, I've tested it, it works. Now how do I make use of this, or how do I actually get this to interface with a lot of Salesforce? How do I provide my admin those capabilities, or what would admin do once a developer gives them a component? Well, you open them a lot of opportunities. Let's see what happens with this. So let's say you want to make this to Salesforce 1, right? You want to plug this dashboard to a Salesforce 1 interface or Salesforce 1 app. So the way to do that is you go to here, you go to Lightning App Builder, click on the Lightning App Builder. So once you build a Lightning component, right, you can build a Lightning page out of that. So for a sec, let me build that. So let's say you say Lightning App Builder, and then you have the opportunity to put your component on different things. So for example, you want to put it on a home page of the Lightning experience, you want to make it as a record page, record specific page. For example, if you want an opportunity page in the Lightning view, you can definitely attach that, or on the home page or on the app page. So let's build a simple app page or an SF app page. So I'll say, okay, okay, and we can say, okay, what type of layout you want. Let's keep it very simple. I want a one-column layout. I'll say, okay, give me a one-column layout. Let's say, okay, let's say that this is Salesforce Saturday leaderboard. Salesforce Saturday leaderboard. Okay. So you finish this, right? So now you have the opportunity to drag that, right? Now in case, which is the Salesforce leaderboard is our component that we can drag here, right? So just drag and drop. We built it, we made it very simple for the admin. It's just going to drag and drop, and look at this. It's responsive, right? Because I used SLDS, right? So it made it responsive. I don't have to worry about my device anymore, right? Awesome. So let's go to the phone view because we are concentrating on SF1. Now let's save this, okay? And then we will say, okay, activate this page to make it visible for all your users. Yes, sure, please do it. And then we say save this. Now you want to save it for SF1, right? Go here and you say add this page to the menu, right? You have this. So you have the Salesforce. Let me drag it to a bit. Let's say I don't want this, okay? So I said, okay, I want this here in the top of my thing. Save this. It's going to take some time. Save, successful, activated, fine. Let's get back here. So as you can see, I have a small plugin here just to make our demo pretty easier. One sec. Okay, so this is going to emulate it basically. So as you can see, now I have got this, I've got this. All right, just give me a sec. Yeah, so I've got this, as a bundle here. So as you can see, we've got this working, We built this component and it's completely responsive. All right, let's get back here onto our app builder experience here. All right, so we saw this in the way it works, right? All right, now let's get back to our demo, guys. Let's get back to, okay, so this is one example. Again, you can switch to the Lightning experience and add it to your home page as well. It all depends on the interface, the first interface that you write, on the component. So as you can see, I have some component here. I'll go here and I'll edit this page. Just edit this page now, right? I edited this page here. So if you want to pull this component on, let's say, okay, this is the leaderboard for your sales manager, right? He wants to see this. Let's pull this guy here, right? So you got it. Now you save this and you activate this, right? Yeah, set this as the default homepage for all the profiles. So let's say, okay, this is activated, right? That's it. So once you build your component, once I'm in the Lightning experience, I should see the same component being worked out here. There you go. Beautiful. It renders everything, right? So as simple as that. Once you build it, you can pretty much put it on every layout. You can also put it on opportunity layout if you want. Don't want to get into that, but yeah, you can just say, okay, if you want to edit this, just edit this page. Yeah, again, it's a bundle for you to drop your Lightning components here, and you should see your components in the custom. You can see I have the Salesforce leader main. You can drag and drop wherever you want. Save this and back, and then you should be all working, I guess. So there it is. It just works, and you can see the model as well, which is great. You can see the model. It just works. It hides everything. Fine. Perfect. Awesome. So let's get started here with, let's get on to, so again, the key thing is to understand the interfaces here, right? So when I switch back to my Sublime here, um, right? So when you look at your Sublime text that I have, I'm sorry, is it a different one? Yes, it looks like a different one. Let's open the Sublime text. Yeah, so this is the one. So again, looking at this, right? What do I mean by an interface? So interface is basically this one. So this is what decides where exactly your component will reside, right? If you want to make it app hostable, which is again for the SF1 available for all page types. Again, you want to have for community builder, have a component for community builder, which is YouTube search component basically. So for the community builder, you say that it's available. You implement force community actually. So you implement a force community. Let's jump back to our slides. I am not sure where we are here in terms of slides. Yeah, so we saw this. Now let's look at another demo that I have, and the reason why I made is, again, I want to make it very clear that this components can be used, to call external systems and get the data from there, not only Salesforce. And the other point that I want to make sure is, you understand Force community interface, which is basically for your community. So let's flip back to our bear with me for a moment. Yeah, flip back to our, let's flip back here, all right? So let's go back to our classic view here. So switch back to the classic view, and all right, now let's go to communities. So have you seen communities with new templates, Nepili templates? I'm sure most of them I see are working on these templates. It's basically a drag and drop builder, just like you have, you have other builders. So this is a drag and drop builder, basically. So let's look at one of the communities that I've built here. So this is a simple community interface that you actually build here using Lightning components. Now what I've done is when you look at the topics, for example, when you look at this, right, Lightning components, I fetch some YouTube content directly from the YouTube, right? So as you can see, I fetched some YouTube content here from the YouTube. I built a component basically and dragged and drop onto my community interface. So community is for your customers basically, and Salesforce by default provides community builder by which you can arrange and build your Lightning component. So let's go to the builder and see how did I do it and what code we need to do. Again, it's similar to how we built other Lightning components. You'll spin up a component bundle, you'll add all your HTML and CSS. But so the community builder, right? Every page in the community builder is again a different build, a Lightning page or a Lightning page where you can drag and drop the Lightning component. So for example, my search page, right? That is what you see when I search for something. Like let's say I search for Lightning components, I see this. So you look at here. So this is the component that I dragged and dropped. Okay. So you see all your custom components will come here, right? So YouTube search is the component that I built, and I can just drag and drop and pass this search string. So this is what is happening when I'm searching. So for example, on a community interface, right? So let me go back to my, just bear with me for a moment here. All right, let's bear with me for a moment here. All right, let's go to the community that I had. So communities. Let's go to the communities, right? So let's see. So let's say I'm searching for mastering Lightning components, right? Video mastering Lightning components. I'm searching for all the articles and questions, and then I also populate a video out of it, from the YouTube directly. Again, so you can look at that. This is a search page, and I added that component here in my builder, I added a component here in my builder, and I passed that search string, which is nothing but the string that I'm searching here, right? So all these are exposed as an environment variable. So there are a lot of environment variables that Salesforce exposes on the builder. So you can just use that environment variable. Your admin can configure that, and that should just pick up the search term that I'm searching and render the content accordingly, right? So if you look at, so let's go back to our Sublime text a bit and go back to that component. So this is the YouTube search component basically. So as you can look this up, right? The search string, I have also a design file here. So you look at this, we have a design file. We just don't have a component has attributes, which is nothing but our data, which is the YouTube data that I'm getting from, and the search string. And then the design file, as you can see the design file, right? It is mapped to, so what does a design file does inside this component bundle is basically it exposes a parameter here. So let's see. Sorry about this flipping. Actually, I'm getting used to Mac. So as you can see, this design variable, right? This design variable is nothing but this design variable, right? This is nothing but, this is nothing but this one, the design attribute that you expose. And each of this attribute map to your attribute here. So you define your attribute. If you want to expose that as a design variable for your admins to go and enter a component there or enter something there, and based on that data you want to do some logic, in that case, you basically define that here and define, you bind the same name to a design attribute, and that design attribute is exposed as a configuration for an admin. So you can input that, when he's setting up the component or dragging that onto a builder. So very important concept to remember is you always implement a first community interface if you want to put that component on a community interface, right? And then it's similar to, so in your handler, you will call an action which calls this controller, YouTube search controller. It gets all the results from that, and then we just iterate and show it as an individual card. Now, individual card itself, you can make it as a component so that it is reusable, right? If you have a detail page, let's say you are building a detail page and you want one component there, a result card, right? If you go to the result card, it's a component again, which is one single card, then it takes you to the YouTube. All right. I think we are doing well on time here, and let me switch back to my slides and go over other thing. Again, building for homepage, you have to implement something called as available for a homepage, and then you can go through this topic more in your Lightning Component Developer Guide, where you can actually get the ID of the record that you are viewing, and then you can do some more logic based on that ID and get working for your home pages. All right, let's move on to something interesting here, guys. Did I repeat the slides? Oh my God, I repeat the slides. Okay, no worries, deleted it. All right, so lightning out. Okay, so this is another interesting thing. What is lightning out now? We talked about building lightning components. We talked about how they can be used in SF1. We talked about how we can use it in various other places like Lightning Experience, record pages. Can I use that component on my Visualforce, right? Or can I use it in my external system? Can I use it in SharePoint? Can I use it in SAP? Yes, you can do it. The answer is yes, you can do it. You have to use something called as lightning out, which is basically another tech stack, on top of our Lightning. We'll look at a couple of demos here how to do that. So let's switch back to our slides. Let me really close this guy a bit. I want to force quit this. Anyways, let's go back to the slides. All right, so let's go to our org Visualforce page. I've built a Visualforce page. Let's go to the home. Oh, sorry, let's go to community management here. All right, so let's go to a Visualforce page that I built and carry the same component here. So if I go to my pages, Visualforce pages. Now I want to show this component on the Visualforce now. And so this is sales leaderboard. So this is what a Visualforce that I've built. Now as you can see, the Visualforce is very simple. You have a separate tag called Apex Include Lightning. Apex Include Lightning basically ensures that you can use a Lightning component bundle inside that, or your Lightning, and you need to provide a div where you want to render that Lightning component, right? So this is a Visualforce page. Now to build that, you have to build something called as dependent app. I will talk about what is dependent app. So this sales leaderboard VF app. Now this is a dependent app. Now to show you a demonstration, let me switch back and go to that sales leaderboard VF app and see what I have done there. So basically, this you don't implement any interface. In fact, you extend an interface called out app. Okay, you say LTNG out app, and what you do with this is you actually define your dependencies, right? For example, this app is dependent on which component? Leaderboard main, right? I want the leaderboard main component. Now, what is leaderboard main? It's a Lightning component. It has the detail and the exact functionality that we have seen. All right, so we define the dependency, and now let's switch back to our Chrome. So as you can see here, we say, okay, create component, which component you want to display, and which is that dependent app. So we say, okay, this is app. Now when I preview this, right? All right, it rendered the same thing, but now it's running inside a Visualforce, right? The same Lightning component that I've built. I've not written anything, any Visualforce markup. It's just like 3 lines of JavaScript code where I've indicated, okay, I want my Lightning component on this div ID, leaderboard ID, and I want to render this sales leaderboard main component, right? I want to, have an app dependency here. So once you do that, you also get a callback here where you can do some more stuff like event handling and things like that. So as you can see now, this is running on Visualforce. This is no more running inside a Lightning container. The same app or the same code base, everything is running inside of Visualforce. All right, so this is one part of the demonstration. Now also I talked about exposing to another app, right? Heroku app. So let's do one thing. Let's log out of this Salesforce environment altogether. Enough of having displayed on Salesforce. Let's log out of all the possible. Let's say login.salesforce.com. Okay, cool. So let me go to another thing called as Heroku. So I'm trying to go to a Heroku application here. Okay, I'm trying to go to a Heroku application. So the moment I go to the Heroku application, so this is running on Heroku now. It's no more running on Salesforce, and it's asking me the username and password for Salesforce. I say this, I enter this, right? So as you can see, the same component that I built is no more running on Salesforce.com anymore. It's running on some other thing. And definitely this is not Salesforce. This is Heroku Node app, which is running on a Heroku, an external system. So you can take that component outside Salesforce, which is on a Heroku. And now you can see it's all up and running. And the same component. Again, to build this, you need a Heroku app, and I have a GitHub repo I can share with you guys on my slide. I think I forgot to add the GitHub repo link, where I've coded that, and it basically takes your component into the, it takes you everything into a Heroku instance. It takes you outside Salesforce basically. All right. Let's see. Let's go back to the slides now. Yeah, so that's pretty much I had it for covering this. I have some reference material for you where I got most of the content from. Some of them, like Mastering Lightning Components 1 and 2 videos, are from Trailhead DX conference, and it is one of the best resources I've found. Trailhead is one of the resources where you can get some hands-on experience, and obviously the Lightning component itself is pretty vast and has a lot of info. So if you have questions, let's open this floor for questions, guys. If you have any questions. But I would like you all to chat those questions, and let us one by one address it. Like I have some time where I can devote it for the Q&A, and then we'll go for the Q&A. So Atul asked me that in Heroku, which language is it written in, right? It's Node.js, and let me show you a quick repo. Let me go to my Git repo and show you. All right, this is not my personal repo. Okay, this is no. So here's the link, Atul. If you want, you can take all the code snippets for. I can't find Sublime Text app in Mac. So here's the thing, Atul. You can go through this. Basically, it has that app in Node. So everything is written in Node, Node.js, and it's simple JavaScript again, if you're familiar with JavaScript. So I can't find Sublime Text app in Mac. Well, you have to download that from the Google. Just search for Sublime Text 2. You'll get Sublime Text 3, and you'll get that. And then install a CLI on top of it. Go and search for force.com CLI. You'll get a CLI. Install that. So, and then you have a set of instructions. So what you can do is you can go through one of videos on my blog. So if you go to cloudyworlds.blogspot, you will see I have instructions, so step-by-step instructions of how to download CLI and how to configure this in Mavens for this. Okay, what is SVG? How is it helping in Lightning design? Okay, so this is an interesting question. So SVG is basically, so as you can see, I have SVG here, okay? So SVG is basically an advanced version of your images, right? So if you look at my demo that I have here, so if you look at this, if you look at this, this is an SVG icon. It's basically an advanced version of, it's a vector graphic basically. It's a scalable vector graphic, which basically renders images in a nice format and sort of gives you a flex sort of feeling. It's an advanced. So basically for an SVG, I already have a component here. You can just copy paste the same component, and that. So as an SVG you see here, right? So this is an SVG. I have this. So anywhere I want to use this SVG component, I can just use it. It's a reusable SVG component. So a Trailhead also has a module on how to create a reusable SVG component, and you can also refer my repo. It has that SVG component which you can reuse it. So basically, I think in my detail, when I want an SVG, I say, okay, give me the c.svg, and then I put my class, and then I put my which icon you want in an SVG, right? So this is the symbol. There are different SVGs exposed, like this dollar closes. So the close is basically that icon, and if you change this name, and then you can use different icons that are exposed as an SVG in SLDS currently. Let's pick up some more question. Is Lightning a proprietary technology of? Okay, there are a bunch of questions. Let me go. Is it necessary to use Lightning App Builder to showcase Lightning component? Well, you need not use App Builder, but you need a Lightning app. You need a Lightning app to basically, you need that a shell, which is app. Like if you see here, if you look at here as an app, you need a shell like this, and then you need that URL, and then you say, okay, the name of your app, like say it's leaderboard app.app, and then you will display that component. So you need a shell at least to test it, and then it's not necessary that you need an app builder. You can build a component only for a community builder, or you can build a component only specifically to use in your Visualforce. But to make it testing easier, you need a shell like aura.application. Let's go and take more questions here. Okay, which is better since you use Sublime and Atom? It actually depends on your preference. I prefer Sublime because Atom gets slower as you have more and more files. But you're free to use Atom. Atom is also nice. But the problem with Atom is if you're on a Windows, it doesn't work well. Like the Mavens app. Mavens app is again an external app built by Maven Consulting Company. So if you sort of use that on your Windows, you will see that you will run into a bunch of issues and you will never be able to get it working. Although you can open those issues and comment on the GitHub repo that these are the issues, and I don't know if it's going to be solved. But the good thing is Sublime has its own plugin, which is officially sort of Salesforce Evangelist supported. So it's better to use that, and I prefer that. And let's go and talk about some more questions which are interesting here. Is Lightning a proprietary Salesforce technology? Yes. So Lightning is built on top of Aura framework. So Aura is again an open source framework from Salesforce, and Lightning is just a customization on top of it to expose it to Salesforce developers only. But if you want, you can take the Aura framework itself and build a Java app or any other app, just like how Lightning framework is built. So inside, under the hood, it's an Aura. Okay, next, let's see. A bunch of questions that are coming here. When to use Lightning App Builder and Lightning App? Oh, well, the Lightning App Builder is basically when somebody is on a Lightning experience and you want a component to be placed on the home page or a record page. And if you're on Lightning experience, then use Lightning App Builder. Don't use Lightning App Builder for the testing. It's only for the admins to expose your components. How to use select list inside the table? Well, this is developer-centric question. I would like to see what you have tried. So basically, there are options. If you go to SLDS, there's a select list. So, but yeah, I mean, it's not that easy to write a select list like Visualforce. But yeah, there are select list tags. If you go and look at the Aura component, you have UI select option or something like that, which is an equivalent, and you can use that. Or SLDS itself will have that, and a little bit of Apex back and forth should make it work. Can we use Bootstrap CSS? Yes, absolutely. So you can use any CSS on top of it, not just Bootstrap. So, but we recommend SLDS because you want to make your app look exactly like Salesforce Lightning Experience. Lightning Experience in Salesforce uses SLDS. Okay, Sublime require any package for Lightning component? Yes. So you will download Lightning package for Sublime. So my slides have the link for that, and once you click on that, you should be able to go to that plugin, and you use package control of Sublime to load all those plugins. Are there any components to create dynamic pick list? Yes, there are components. If you go to Lightning Component Developer Guide, you can in fact dynamically create a markup. You don't have to create a markup before. Like you can say $a.create component, and then you can write your HTML and dynamically create a markup. Like jQuery, right? In jQuery, you can create a DOM. Similar to that, we have our $a.create component where you can create a bunch of components, dynamically. Can we have recorded video of the session? Madan will answer that for you. What is the difference between Bootstrap and SLDS? Yeah, so the difference between Bootstrap and SLDS is, again, Bootstrap has its own set of components for you. It has a layout pattern. SLDS also. So Bootstrap is not officially supported, right? I mean, not officially from Salesforce. I'm not telling it's supported. It's not officially from Salesforce. While SLDS is something that Salesforce internally uses for their apps. And they internally use Aura framework and Lightning framework for their own app build. So SLDS is basically their own version of it for our app developers on the platform to expose that to us. Do you have anything? No, that's not there. How do you get the lookup fields in the page? Yeah, so there is something called as force input. So just like input field, we have force input and force output tags. If you go to Lightning Component Developer Guide, you'll find them. There you can expose a field. You can expose a complete field for you to sort of get you the lookup. Like you can bind a field itself there, and that should get you what you need. But you can build your lookup component as well. I mean, build a generic lookup component and put it on an app exchange. Even the app exchange might have a lookup component, so you might want to explore that. And which will be generic, like you feed the object name, field name, and it's gonna automatically give you the lookup. And the SLDS has a lookup window module, so you can use that. Can we change the shape of the display cards to circle, etc. for rectangular? Yes, you can, because it's, the rectangular is basically, it's how you code your CSS. So currently, the card model is there on SLDS, but you can modify that to SLDS itself. Like you can modify inside the component if you want, and convert that. It's not. Does Lightning fetch data and store it on the client since your SLD contains storage? Yes, you have something called as Aura storage, where you can make actionables as storage. Again, you make your action storage storable actions. So you can make your action storable, then your action is stored on the front end. So you can do a little bit of offline capability. I've not explored much on that. That sounds like a session in itself. How to get to use community builder? Where can I see it? So yeah, in your developer org, spin up a developer org, enable chatter on it, and then enable communities. And then when you create a community, it will ask you, okay, you want a template-based community or a Visualforce-based community. So you select template-based communities, and then based on that, you will get up a builder, and then you can play with that. So it's for. I find some tags starting with UI and some with force. What is the exact difference between them? That's a great question, actually. Hats off to that. So again, so force components are basically an advanced version of it, or most of them are events. Like if you look at force, like if you want to refresh a component, right? So we have events. So force is basically version, like compare with the Visualforce, right? We have Apex input text, right? And we have Apex chatter feed component. Now, what is the difference between Apex chatter feed and Apex input, right? The difference is Apex input is very primitive, where Apex chatter is like everything is provided for you. So similarly, what Salesforce is doing is they are building their force component for us so that we don't have to code a lot of things. Like for example, if you need a force chatter feed, so as soon as you input that component force chatter feed, you should see a chatter tag displaying. So, and some of the events are named with force. So as you can see, there are a lot of standard events provided by the platform. Like you can create a custom events as well by either making it as an application event or a component event. Again, application events are basically to communicate between any of the components in your app. Component events are events is published only inside your component. So yeah, I mean there are events standard by Salesforce and they are named with force. Can we build Lightning app and Classic app simultaneously for an organization? Yes, you can build it, and you can have some set of users on Lightning and some set on Classic. I mean there are permission sets to configure that. And is it recommended? Absolutely yes, if your users are happy with that. I mean it's a question to your business analyst team and not your technical team. So what is recommended, Lightning component or Lightning components in VF? Again, at this point we are in sort of transition phase where there are tons of customers who are using Visualforce, and so you can style a Visualforce just to look like a Lightning and not go through Lightning component-based framework. It's because when you think of an app from Lightning component framework, it's a lot of work in itself. But if your customer is always on Lightning experience, right, then it's better to give them as a components instead of Visualforce pages. Although Visualforce pages is also supported in Lightning experience in GA, but it's so imagine something like an app exchange, right? I see this good for app exchange apps because you can bundle your components and put it on an app exchange, and your customers can just download them and install them, and that way they get to the bundle very easily, and you don't have to worry about all these Visualforce pages and things like that. But currently, yeah, we are going into that transition. I think, or I predict that it's going to be like maybe a couple of years. By then time, everybody starts on Lightning and starts building everything, in true component framework model. But as I already explained to you, right, there is architectural differences between the way things work here in Lightning and way in Visualforce. So there are a lot of differences in architecturally itself. So it's going to take some time where everyone is going to transition. But if you are spinning up a new org for your new customers, try to explore with Lightning experience first and see how they feel about it, because it's all about getting used to it. So customers who are already used to Classic, they might find it very hard to do that transition. While if a customer is seeing Salesforce for the first time and you present them with Lightning experience, it really makes sense. So yeah, that's question itself is like, it's still in the transition at this. How can we ensure governor limits in Lightning? Whatever governor limits are you talking about? Like, again, the governor limits here are your triggers. When you are doing a DML, right, it's going to run your triggers. So ensure all your bulkified limits. What do you mean limits? So for example, query, right? 50,000 rows. Well, Lightning makes it so simple. I mean, if you look at the UI, we don't recommend to, show 50,000 rows at all to the client. Like, we say, okay, show them 20 components and then paginate through or provide them filters so that they can search for that exact term and pick up those and show it, or provide them sorters where they can sort it client server side, and keep your UI very simple, from the data display point of view. But again, the pagination and everything can be handled with offset queries and things like that. It's just like how you do it for Visualforce. But the good thing is you don't have view state limit anymore. With Visualforce, you have to be very, particular about what you are storing or how much of data is going between back and forth. And everything is as a JSON, right? So if you want to push like more than 3 MB of data, your Apex class itself will blow up. It's all about managing your Apex at that end. Can you make me presenter? Well, we don't want to do that at this point. Is there any view state kind of thing? No, there is nothing like that. Lightning works on system mode? No, so we recommend to use with sharing class on all your effects so that it respects all your sharing roles and it doesn't run on system mode. Yeah. Okay, so your Apex classes might run on some system mode, like for example for your DML. Your sharing rule is obviously respected with sharing, but your DML, so if you are publishing an app for an app exchange, then it's your responsibility to go and check for each profile, each field level. Probably you might want to take some libraries that are there out there and wrap your Apex there so that, you respect the permissions of the org. Anyways, if you don't do that, your app exchange is going to fail the security review. All right, we have 8 more minutes precisely where I can take up the questions. So bring it more questions. Let me see if I missed any question. Is there a design template document for Lightning project? Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, this is what I was thinking in the morning when I was presenting this session, that hey, yeah, how cool it will be to have a CLI like you have for React or for Angular, where you say that, okay, generate me these templates, generate me these things. I think we have not got to that point, to be frank. It's all manual copy paste at this point, copy paste code from the GitHub repos or from developer guide and see if it works. But it'll be cool to have templates and a library, a set of library which exposes you. Again, opportunity for community, right? Step up, like spin up a GitHub resource, try to add as much templates as possible and make it happen. But yeah, currently we don't have a CLI as well. Like I would want a command line tool where you say that, okay, this is my controller method, this is my Lightning component name, generate me the bundle, wire me some of the attributes, these are my attributes, and automatically generate all those things for me as a first step, and then I can go ahead and customize it. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice vision to have. I wanted to pass ID dynamically to the component. How can we do this? So I have a search component and search display based on the ID passed from them. I want to pass ID dynamically to component. Okay. It's developer related question again. You want to pass an ID again, as I said, you need to have a design variable, or if you are, so again, what is your use case here? If you want to pass an ID, what is your use case here that we are looking? Maybe spin up an aura enable class and that will pull up everything, and then you keep typing, and based on the type you look back the database. So it's a little developer related question. Get it on the developer forum. So in recent releases, I heard of locker service. What is the impact on Lightning? Glad that somebody brought that question up. What is a locker service? Yes, so this is very interesting concept of locker service. So if you go to your org, I don't know if you can still see my screen. Let me. So as you can see, if I go to the setup, right, and go to the locker service here. Sorry, critical update. It's called critical update, guys. So the locker service is going to be a mandatory. So as you can see, I have enabled the locker service currently. So as a best practice to start with, always enable the locker service. Don't ever disable it, because this is going to be mandatory. Like currently, because the locker, so what is a locker service is basically protects you against security threat. It basically, so currently, if you want to access another component DOM, right, you can easily do that, via document.getElement by ID of the page and do it, which is not, your DOM can also be, have some security vulnerabilities like, CSRF or, other security threats. So you want to secure that DOM. So Salesforce wrote a layer on top of it, which basically hides all the DOM and exposes you only the, only the DOM of your components for you. And it hides all the properties and the methods so that, it's a technological solution. There are a lot of videos on the YouTube if you search for it. So remember, you have to activate the locker service. So what has happened is there are some JavaScript libraries in the ecosystem. Like JavaScript is a beast in itself. When I speak about JavaScript, it's a very complex language. It has its own things. There are a lot of community behind it. It's been there for a longer time in the ecosystem, and people have built a lot of libraries. Now, are they all Locker compliant, which means do they officially support only tags which are safer at this point from the security threats? They might not, and that is the time your Lightning library may break up, or it will break up saying that, okay, there is some Lightning internal error, or there is some weird error that you will see as you build more and more Lightning components with external frameworks. So, well, typically I would suggest, to test all those libraries under the Locker before you sort of adopt for a customer or push or adopt it for your project. Let's say you are looking to use chat.js, right? Go and test your chat.js. Have a story in your development cycle which says, okay, test chat.js with Locker, whether it works or not. If it does not, and if your timelines are critical, just dump that library and start thinking about something that's Locker compliant. And try to build as much as native with SLDS and the component framework. Not avoid using libraries, but again, JavaScript is a complex language in itself, as I said, and there are a lot of community work who have already built some of the things which might just work, like as you import in your Visualforce. You just import in your Lightning components and load that with after scripts loaded tag, and then everything should work provided they are Locker compliant. All right, UI message, you can show errors. Yes, that's true, you can show errors. How can we maintain namespace in Lightning dynamically so that C does not fail in namespace enabled org? Pankaj, that's a very, very nice question. In fact, I'm glad that this is the right platform to bring that. So yeah, so typically I started with a namespaced org, and that's why I went and did all this namespacing here, okay? You don't actually namespace it. You say, okay, C dot, just replace everywhere with C dot and V dot, and that should work for you. But there is one glitch that I have found is when you bind your field, right? For example, you create a custom field on an account, let's call it as some number field you created. So what happens is once you go to a packaging org, or once you go to a package namespace, everything will blow up saying, okay, it's not able to find this field because your field is no more saying that exact field name. Like you have a namespace in front of that field name. Like it's namespace _ C and then this. So again, I mean, to be on a safer side, the recommended approach is build a message layer. Okay, if you're building an App Exchange product, typically build a message layer. The message layer should say, like for example, account, right? You build an account wrapper on top of it. Like build a wrapper class which replicates the same account data model. That way, what will happen is your queries or your Apex will automatically get namespace when you package it, and then you don't have to worry about your front end, because in the front end it's seeing the wrapper object. It's not seeing the actual field name. And that way, that's one of the ways to avoid this. In fact, I'm planning to write a blog post on that and show how namespacing works and things like that. Does that solve your problem, Pankaj? All right. Well, I am running out of the time, and it's a Saturday here in States, and fields mentioned in JavaScript does not get namespace. Yes, that's correct. The fields will not get namespace. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not get namespace. It's on my website, cloudyworlds.blogspot.com. So yeah, fields mentioned in JavaScript does not get namespace. that's truly correct. It does not get namespace, and that's why what I want to do is I want to write a message layer. Like I want to say, okay, I want to write the wrapper class field instead of use the object field names when there are custom objects here. That way you will avoid it. Oh, so you said, okay. So you said field mentioned in JavaScript doesn't get, yeah, that's correct. Do you have a blog for this to look into? Yes, I'm planning a blog to blog on these topics. You can follow my Twitter handle the moment I blog. So this is my blog if you want to bookmark it, and this is my Twitter handle if you want to tweet me and ask me questions. If I'm free, obviously I have other commitments as well. But if I'm free, I'm happy to address and bring all the questions on posts like Stack Exchange, where there are more experts. Always looking for help and help the community as a whole. So, all right, I think we are running out of time, and we took approximately 1.5 hours to go through a lot of awesome content, and I am so excited that we started this, and especially for Bangalore folks, because I'm from Bangalore, I have special attachment there. But again, I welcome all of you who have joined from US. I have a thanking slide to thank Madan and Kishore. They have been working with me to organize this. Salesforce Bangalore user group for organizing this. And also thanks for all those who have tuned in the morning. I know it's PST. For PST folks, special thank you, because I know it's almost 6:30 a.m. now, and if you have tuned in to 5 a.m. just to listen to me, I don't know, I'm on top of the world now. I have a great feeling for you, and thank you so much. Thanks everyone. This has been awesome. Thanks for your patience. I saw there were people switching off their mics initially, but I'm so glad that everyone switched it off. And if you are able to not listen to me completely due to your network issues, we'll have recordings for you to post and take it from there. So thanks again, and have a nice Saturday and Sunday, and have a nice evening to the folks in India. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mohit. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
So, guys,
Yeah,
I'll share you with this recorded session soon. And if you guys have any questions, so you can follow to Mohit and me. So we will get back to you with your answers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mohit.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bangalore team.
Yeah, thank you.